welcome to this brand new edition of Global Lens on Newsline Live with me, Neha Khanna. As always, we have a packed show for you. Let's get started with our big focus. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has called a general election for the 4th of July, 4 months earlier than expected. A decision that has taken many by surprise. So why now? In some ways, the equation was simple. When you've had as much bad news as the British Prime Minister did in recent months, you'll take anything in the way of good fortune. UK watchers say these are the possible factors that may have driven Sunak's decision to bring the election forward. Some signs of light at the end of the economic tunnel, the long-awaited passage of his flagship Rwanda immigration scheme, the prospect of a feel-good soccer tournament, the Euros on the horizon, and some sunnier weather. It must have felt to Sunak that if he waited any longer, things could only get worse. The decision, announced a little after 5 p.m. on Wednesday, came as a shock to Westminster and much of the country at large, where the assumption had been that the Prime Minister would hang on until the fall, allowing him the comfort, should he lose, of going down in history books as having racked up a respectable 2 years at number 10. However, it could be a risky strategy. The Tories are 20 points behind the opposition Labour Party in the polls. Some say with the element of surprise, one of the chief advantages remaining for a UK government facing a rather tricky election. It seems Sunak has decided to gamble on the theory that the outlook would never be better than this summer to face the voters. With the exception of a brief spell early this century when the government was run by a coalition, British Prime Ministers have always had the power to call a general election at a time of their choosing, so long as the date falls within 5 years of the last poll. That meant Sunak had until January 2025 to name the day. In January this year, he had said his working assumption was that the next election would take place in the second half of the year. Analysts say the temptation for Rishi Sunak had always been to go long and hope against hope that something would come up to save him from the electoral drubbing that opinion polls have been predicting for virtually his entire time in government. Going early could be seen as an unlikely act of daring by a Prime Minister usually known for treading cautiously. On the morning of his election announcement, the UK Office for National Statistics announced that inflation had finally almost hit the all-important 2% target. That means the Conservatives can now go into the election pointing to stable food prices and energy bills, with voters feeling some impact of Chancellor Jeremy Hunt's 2 cuts to national insurance. Wages are murky, unemployment relatively low but crucially expected to rise by the end of the year. And with his Rwanda immigration scheme finally in place, moving now spares him the embarrassment of a likely surge in small boat crossings later in the summer. Observers also say from all accounts, Sunak didn't seem to be loving life. At number 10, he was handed a near impossible task, coming in as he did at the tail end of well over a decade of Conservative rule, and with his predecessor Liz Truss having tanked the economy. That created what they say appears to be a Black Wednesday moment, named for the day in 1992 when former Tory Prime Minister John Major oversaw Britain crashing out of the exchange rate mechanism, an economic and political disaster so acute that voters never again trusted his government and voted him out and Tony Blair in 5 years later. Bruised by the sky-high mortgages and cost of living pressures ushered in during Truss's brief time at the helm, voters were reluctant to give Rishi Sunak a chance for all his claims to have restored stability and competence to 10 Downing Street. Sardonically, some British political writers also say, with Sunak having been frustrated politically, life in the cramped flat in number 10 must have seemed less and less appealing, especially after his and his wife's personal fortune increased by £120 million to £651 million. So, what are the big issues in this UK election? The economy. Britain faces high inflation and slow growth, making many feel poorer. Although the Conservatives halved inflation from its peak of 11.1% in October 2022, the economy entered a technical recession in late 2023, raising doubts about their policies. Immigration. The issue of asylum seekers and economic migrants crossing the English Channel has raised border control concerns. The Conservative plan to deport some migrants to Rwanda faces criticism for being inhumane and ineffective. Healthcare. The NHS struggles with long waiting lists and delays in services, leading to public frustration over healthcare delivery. The environment. Rishi Sunak has delayed environmental commitments such as ending sales of petrol and diesel vehicles and approving new North Sea oil drilling, which critics argue undermines efforts to combat climate change. So what happens next? According to multiple opinion polls, Rishi Sunak's party, the Conservatives, which has been in power for the last 14 years, is expected to lose this election to the opposition Labour Party led by Keir Starmer. Many say it could be a crushing defeat. The Tories are trailing Labour in all opinion polls, in fact. Public opinion regarding Sunak's government has been on the downhill track. Labour is running about 20 percentage points ahead of the Conservatives. Since taking the Prime Minister's post less than 2 years back, Sunak has tried and failed to position himself as a reformer, technocrat and steady leader. There are also those who say the global cost of living crisis has overshadowed any successes the Sunak government may have had. Therefore, the Prime Minister's decision to hold early snap elections received a mixed response from his own party. Some Tories believe the time is right for an election, considering potential legal challenges and economic uncertainties, while others were shocked by the decision. Standing outside his Downing Street office in heavy rain to announce the election, Sunak listed his achievements, both as Prime Minister and former Finance Minister. Now, both parties have begun campaigning, focusing on the economy and defence. Sunak's government accuses Labour of planning tax hikes and being unprepared for global challenges. Labour blames the Conservatives for economic mismanagement over the past 14 years, resulting in instability and slow growth. If Labour wins, Britain will see 6 Prime Ministers in 8 years, a situation not witnessed since the 1830s. The question we're asking on Global Lens tonight is this: could the UK election on the 4th of July bring the curtains down on the reign of the country's first India-born Prime Minister? What is this election likely to mean for Sunak's political career and for the British people?
Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July. This election will take place at a time when the world is more dangerous than it has been since the end of the Cold War. Putin's Russia is waging a brutal war in Ukraine and will not stop there if he succeeds. That war has also made it all too clear the risk to our energy security. In the Middle East, the forces of Islamist extremism threaten regional and ultimately global stability. These tensions are exploited by extremists who seek to undermine our values and divide our society here at home. China is looking to dominate the 21st century by stealing a lead in technology. And migration is being weaponized by hostile states to threaten the integrity of our borders. These uncertain times call for a clear plan and bold action to chart a course to a secure future. You must choose in this election who has that plan, who is prepared to take the bold action necessary to secure a better future for our country and our children.
The truth is that he's bottled it. He's cut and run. Why? Because he was absolutely terrified, as Ben quite rightly alluded to the fact that Reform UK is going up and up in the polls with our common sense policies to save Britain, whilst the Tories have been sinking in the polls. And I can also confirm with great excitement that we will be standing in 630 seats across the whole of England, Scotland and Wales. No ifs, no buts.
All right, so what could this election throw up? It promises to be a fascinating contest, but one that may not go Rishi Sunak and his party's way. We will dissect every aspect of this election with our panel in just a moment after this quick break.
Start with the end in mind. You need to know where you want to reach. Every morning that we wake up, we are exercising our choice. The destiny is decided. The results are known that I'm going to win. life of a goalkeeper is something which has always intrigued me. When you come into a stadium, this is the highest level of pressure. When I set out to do something, I decide in my mind that failure is not an option.
What you feel very strongly about, those are the stories to tell.
I have a mind which is absolutely restless.
Mind and body are entangled sensations.
That brings me back to golf. It's an amazing game.
This is not a perfect game. You only learn from them.
If you have a formula to a success, then you can replicate it.
I feel this is my first step. I'm starting now.
Winner is first born in the mind. I think, therefore I am. We are all about our mind.
World premiere every Saturday on News 9 Live at 9 p.m.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News 9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and we're discussing the UK election that has been called by Rishi Sunak. In a surprise move, the election is going to be held on the 4th of July. Let's introduce our guests. Joining me on Global Lens tonight, Dr. Amlendu Mishra, Professor at Lancaster University in the UK, joining us live from London. Elizabeth Bro, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, joining us live from Washington, DC. And completing the panel tonight is Ambassador Manju Seth, former Indian diplomat, joining us live from New Delhi. Thanks to all my guests for joining me. Dr. Amlendu Mishra, let me begin with you. You know, Rishi Sunak has been on the back foot for the longest time now. Every opinion poll that has been held in the United Kingdom, in fact throughout his time in office, seems to indicate that the Tories are headed for a crushing defeat. The election had to be held eventually by January next year. But why now, in your opinion? Because this sudden announcement by Rishi Sunak has actually taken many, including the Tories, by surprise.
Hi, good evening, Neha. First of all, there is something called feel-good factor. You talked about economy in your report. So Rishi Sunak felt that this is perhaps the time when he can take that message to the electorate and say that we have done something good in all these years. And then we had the weather. I mean, if you were sort of holding elections sometime in autumn or deepest of winter, it's not going to sort of go in your favor. So we can't sort of ignore that factor there. And finally, the fact is that Sunak had to sort of bite the bullet, so to speak, whether it's in July or sometime in late autumn or early winter. So economy was one of the key factors. And also, perhaps he couldn't sort of avoid the temptation of sort of rolling the dice, so to speak, at an opportune moment when there is a little bit of chaos also in the Labour camp, when they have got popularity in the opinion polls, but they don't necessarily have a strategy or an agenda. Just like the Tories, the Labours are also a house divided, and Sunak perhaps is aware of that particular scenario, and that is the reason why he wanted to go full throttle by announcing the 4th of July election date.
Interesting. Many are calling it a daring decision by a Prime Minister who normally treads cautiously. But Dr. Mishra, do you believe that this is a Prime Minister who knows that he has his back to the wall and in a sense seems resigned to his fate?
Not necessarily. I mean, we can have opinion polls. We can sort of highlight that there is a 20% lead the Labour enjoys. But let's be very clear about it. As let me quote one of the former British Prime Ministers, Harold Wilson, who said, "A week is a long time in politics. We have got 6 weeks straight from now until 4th of July. So anything could happen." Just because Labour has got the lead doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate into an electoral victory, because the British electorate are very apathetic when it comes to going and voting. So what you have in terms of statistics may not necessarily translate into votes for the Labour. And Labour also is facing flack from its core constituency, the Muslims in particular, because of its policies on Israel-Gaza conflict. So that might sort of undermine its position, we don't know. So although, as you rightly pointed out, Sunak is a very cautious politician, but he's also aware of the ground realities, and he may be hope against hope, that things might go in his favor.
Right, he is hoping against hope that maybe there'll be some miracle that will rescue him and the Tories from disaster in the upcoming election. Of course, opinion polls have predicted that it is going to be a rout for the Tories after 14 straight years in power. But then, as Dr. Mishra there says, of course, 1 week is a long time in politics. I need to take another quick break here on Global Lens. We will continue this conversation with our guests.
The game of power politics has begun. The poll bugle has been sounded. Who will receive the death blow? Who will be checkmated? It still remains to be seen.
ये दिखाता है हर कार्यकर्ता का बुलंद हौसला।
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
I was ready to be a CEO at 26.
Only the guys with the strongest heads can handle hard situations.
There is a blurring line between arrogance and confidence.
This is the philosophy of FC Bayern Munich.
World premiere on 25th of May, only on News 9 Live.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News 9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Let me now go across to our next guest, Elizabeth Bro. Miss Bro, you know, many are saying that the Tories are staring at a crushing defeat. And then there are those who feel rather sorry for the current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who has faced relentless criticism almost since the time he took office less than 2 years ago. And the reason they feel sorry for him is because they believe that he was handed a near impossible task when he came into number 10 after a very controversial tenure of Boris Johnson, followed by the disastrous short term that Liz Truss had, where many believe she practically tanked the economy. So whatever measures Rishi Sunak was going to take as Prime Minister, it was never going to be enough to turn around the economic fortunes of the United Kingdom and the political fortunes of the Conservatives. Therefore, do you believe that Rishi Sunak is a man who is fighting this upcoming election with both his hands tied behind his back?
He certainly has extremely poor odds in this election, and that was clear already months ago that it was going to be a very difficult task for him, as you said. And it was always clear when he became Prime Minister that he would most likely be the Prime Minister leading the UK into the next general election, because that election has to take place in January at the latest. And when he came to power, there was general assumption that he would stay those remaining months between he was appointed or elected and the election. his advantage is that his time in number 10 has been less disastrous than that of Liz Truss, and that is a low bar. But I think generally he is respected as being essentially a technocrat, somebody who tries to find solutions. I live in London part-time, and I see that all the time, that basically calm has returned to the UK, but it's not enough of a change for British voters to say, well, now we're going to give the Conservatives a new chance. Because remember, especially in the first past the post system, you choose the person you want to elect. You want to represent your constituency. You don't choose a party, you choose a person. So, and there are lots of Conservatives that are not as technocratic or as solution-oriented, as results-oriented as Rishi Sunak. So he leads a very divided party, and really a party that has severe problems building and regaining trust among the public. And that's why, even if you were to be the most charismatic speaker, in addition to being a competent prime minister and results-focused executive, as it were, he would really struggle to turn this ship around.
It was always going to be a very tough battle for the Tories and for Rishi Sunak. Before we take another break, let me ask you this, Ms. Bro. Most opinion polls seem to suggest that Labour are at least 20 percentage points ahead of the Tories. But do you believe that there are still factors that could perhaps work in favour of the Conservatives, that they could still manage to pull a rabbit out of a hat? Or do you believe that this election is already done and dusted? 14 long years in power, and it is time for the Tories to pack their bags and go home. Do you believe the UK voters have pretty much made up their minds?
I think they've made up their minds, and it's also completely natural when a party has been in power for over a decade, well over a decade, for voters to say, well, now they need to spend some time in opposition, regain their perspective, come up with new ideas, and we'll give another party the opportunity to govern. It is a fact of political life that parties that govern for a very long time become lazy, become complacent, become plagued by infighting, and that's exactly what has happened to the Tories. So even if Rishi Sunak, again, if he were the most amazing campaigner ever, it would just be a state, a fact of political life that after such a long period in government, the party would essentially be worn out, be dry, it would be dry of ideas, short of ideas, and also it would be struggling mightily with the issue of public trust, and that's where we are today. But then, will it be a landslide? Will it not be a landslide? The interesting and frankly sometimes maddening aspect of first past the post systems is that percentages mean very little. Also, what matters is whether a Tory or a Labour candidate or a Liberal Democrat candidate gets the most votes in any given constituency. So even if you win by a small margin percentage-wise nationally, you can win a stumping majority in Parliament simply because your candidates have won individual elections in many more cases than the opposition. So that's why the percentages are less important than in a representative system, but it will be unless barring a major disruption of some kind, it will be a major victory for Labour in this election.
It does look like it's going to be a major victory. Indians will understand when you talk about the shortcomings of the first past the post system, because we here in India also follow the British Westminster model. Okay, time for us to take a quick break here on Global Lens. Don't go anywhere. We will continue this conversation.
How do you fulfill that promise? Because ultimately expectations have to be met. If you look at the political landscape, is it really changing for women? And what is the inability of the forces that dead bodies surface but not the living people?
Can the Trinamool candidate from Baharampur hit the ball out of the park?
50-60 दिन बहुत ज़्यादा बोल रहा हूँ, उससे पहले ही काम दिखने स्टार्ट हो जाएंगे.
Pitted opposite Pathan in Team BJP is Dr. Nirmal Kumar Saha.
The fight is not Adit Chaudhary and Nirmal Saha. The fight between Modi versus Rahul Gandhi.
Yusuf Pathan and Nirmal Saha, two professionals who have switched to politics, are taking on Congress leader Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary. Can one of the first-time politicians end his winning streak?
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
जानना है तो देखिए, समझना है तो सुनिए, सीखना है तो पूछिए और कमाना है तो खरीदिए। जानकारी, सलाह और निवेश सब एक ही सुपर ऐप पर। पैसे का सवाल है तो जवाब है मनी 9। आजादी पैसे की, अभी डाउनलोड करें।
I don't think anybody has isolated Ajit Dada Pawar. Ajit Dada has isolated himself.
That led to a lot of bad blood between the ruling partners.
It is not true. You know it very well, who these elements are, who these individuals are. And these are the very reasons why you see a division in the party.
Now this contest between Supriya Sule and Sunetra Pawar is really a proxy war between uncle and nephew, and it's being fought in the family bastion of Baramati.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News 9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and we're discussing the UK election that is scheduled to be held on the 4th of July. Let me now go across to Ambassador Manju Seth. Ma'am, thank you for waiting patiently. Now, since the day Rishi Sunak took office, as you can imagine, there's been a lot of excitement in India, and people here in this country have watched his term very, very closely. He did make history by becoming the first British Prime Minister of Indian origin. But, as luck would have it, the cards always seem to be stacked against Rishi Sunak. Like I said in the earlier segment, many observers believed that he was given a virtually impossible task of turning around the British economy, which had been completely tanked by his predecessor, who had a disastrous term. The Conservatives were already very unpopular. There was already a very high degree of anti-incumbency. 14 years in power is a very long time. A long list of controversies that dogged Boris Johnson, this, that and the other. That no matter how hard Rishi Sunak was going to try, no matter how stellar his performance was going to be, it was never going to be enough for him to be able to completely rescue the Tories from an electoral debacle, which most opinion polls suggest is coming their way on the 4th of July. So my question to you is, what would a rout for the Tories mean for Rishi Sunak's political career, in your view?
As you very rightly mentioned, the chances for Rishi Sunak's party and for Rishi Sunak to get elected are very bleak at the moment. But as he himself has said, that that inflation has stabilized, as it has dropped, the economy is looking up. They've come out of the recession, which was there in the UK, and it's going on an upward path, and that's why he has taken this risk. And he's put his, I think he's also put his political career at stake. But as in politics, nothing is permanent. And I think he may not leave politics because he is a professional. He was a former banker. But I think he would want to continue, even if he loses his election. I don't think he would quit. And his political future, I think, may not have ended, though he's put it on the line. But I think he will, and you never know what happens when the last vote is cast. And though all indications at the moment are that there is no chance of the Conservatives winning at all. Though he has done some good, taken some steps and done some good work, but the sentiment, anti-incumbency sentiment, and the general situation in the UK, the Rwanda flight and the NHS and all these, the state of the NHS, all these are factors which are troubling for the general population. But you never know what the outcome would finally be until the last vote is counted and it has been cast and counted. But the chances are very less, and he would be, I think, in a difficult spot at the end of these elections.
He would be in a difficult spot, but you don't believe it'll be curtains on his political career?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Very interesting.
Yes. Yeah, I think he would not give up so easily.
Well, all the Indians will certainly be hoping that he does not give up easily and that he does return as British Prime Minister. You know how exciting it's always been for us Indians here to see him at 10 Downing Street, even though he's had a rather unenviable tenure. Let me go back to Dr. Mishra at this point. Dr. Mishra, like I said, the cards were always stacked against Rishi Sunak on the issue of the economy, immigration, NHS, healthcare. But, if you look at it, maybe it wasn't all gloom and doom either in terms of the performance of the Tories, because they actually managed to halve inflation from its peak of 11.1% in October 2022, and then while there have been a lot of controversies over his Rwanda immigration policy, it was supposed to actually appease, the hardliners across the United Kingdom. But do you believe that all that is now too little, too late, and that Rishi Sunak is the captain of a sinking ship? And if that is indeed the case, I will ask you the same question that I put to, Ambassador Manju Seth. How do you see Rishi Sunak's political fortunes changing from here on? Do you believe it will be curtains on his political career, or is this a man who can stage a comeback? Not in this election, I mean.
Yes, indeed. That's a very good question that you're asking. To answer that, let's go back to the period when Liz Truss was elected as the leader of Conservatives, and she sort of effectively stole the limelight and became the shortest living Prime Minister in the living memory. But as luck would have it, 30 days down the line, Rishi Sunak comes back. So that would give him some kind of hope. So it would be premature rather for us to dismiss him altogether, because we have seen in the last 5 to 7 years, his career has been going through a kind of very tumultuous ride, to put it very mildly. He did a fantastic job as the Chancellor of Exchequer, and he didn't expect that he was going to be the kind of prime ministerial candidate because Boris Johnson was always going to be there. So he became a kind of leader of the Tories by default. And given that it was a house divided, they didn't have anyone else but to latch on to him. So that condition hasn't changed altogether. The Tories remain divided. There is a hardline group, and there is a kind of soft liberals, if I could put it that way. But Tories at the moment don't have a kind of tall leader who could unite them. The old ones have kind of, the likes of Sajid Javid, have left, basically. And Liz Truss, while she might want to come back, it won't be a very good prospect for the Tories either. So, given the current context that we have among the Tories, so they wouldn't have anyone else but to fall back on Rishi Sunak. And there will be some sympathies in terms of how it did turn the economy around in spite of all the international challenges, the war in Ukraine, the COVID, and the current crisis that we have in the Middle East in terms of supply chain and all the rest of it. So the economy is at a kind of steady 2.3 inflation rate, or the original expectation was it should be 2.1, but that is not a small achievement. So that would give him hope. And given that he has always been ambitious, I would imagine that he would continue in politics for the foreseeable future. The question, of course, is he's just in his mid-40s, pushing into the mid-40s that is. So what else would he do if he sort of gives up politics? So I think he still would have a long innings in spite of the doom that he's sort of staring into.
All right. So, well, he may face a bruising defeat in this election, but that certainly does not mean the end of the road for Rishi Sunak. Amongst other things, he does have age on his side. Let me go back to Elizabeth Bro at this point. Elizabeth, you know, Rishi Sunak did try very hard to position himself as a reformer, a technocrat, somebody who could steady the ship, given that he came in at a very precarious time, taking over the reins from Liz Truss. But you know, all those efforts really seem to have failed. Now, the campaign has begun. The Tories accuse Labour of planning tax hikes and being unprepared for global challenges, and Labour blames the Conservatives for economic mismanagement over the last decade and a half, resulting in instability and slow growth. Now, given the kind of issues that are being raised by the two parties in this election, what kind of an alternative do you believe the Labour Party is in a position to offer the people of the United Kingdom at this point in time? You know, you and many others seem to believe that it's almost a certainty that Keir Starmer is the next Prime Minister of UK. But the question is, what is it that they are really in a position to offer the people by way of an alternative?
I think Keir Starmer's main advantage is that he has a pretty united party behind him. We should remember that the Tories are so divided. There is an almost toxic atmosphere within the party between the different wings, the more conservative wing or right wing and the more centrist wing. And on top of that, what we have seen in the past few months has been an absolutely unedifying spectacle of Liz Truss in particular, and also Suella Braverman, essentially turning their political fame, as it were, into an opportunity to constantly go on television and attack Rishi Sunak, and indeed attack the institutions of the UK. It's a very selfish thing to do. It doesn't benefit the Conservative Party and it doesn't benefit the UK, but they're doing it because they I don't know whether they're hoping to sell more books or position themselves for some sort of future leadership within the party. But either way, it's extremely damaging. And so what Keir Starmer has is a much more united party behind him, and he has managed to unite the different factions that were so divided during Jeremy Corbyn's time as party leader. So he has a united party. He has a party that's by and large centrist, and he also has new ideas because Labour has spent a very long time now in opposition with the opportunity to think about what they will do once they win an election, whether that be this time or next time. Now it's likely to be this time, and it's going to be very soon.
Okay, it's going to be very soon. So one big advantage certainly for the Labour is that they are united, unlike the Conservatives. And then, of course, the anti-incumbency against the Tory government is a natural advantage for Keir Starmer's party. Ambassador Manju Seth, I'll give you the last word. Now, you know, some in the UK have also joked that Rishi Sunak was perhaps not loving his life at 10 Downing Street. After all, his and his wife's fortunes had risen to £651 million. They're richer than the king of the UK. So probably the flat at 10 Downing Street felt a little cramped. But on a more serious note, he was also dogged by some personal controversies, whether it was the financial status, of the first couple, or Rishi Sunak's wife's legal non-domicile tax status, which stirred a controversy, or the fact that he continued to hold an American green card even as British Prime Minister. Do you believe any of those issues may have also contributed to his unpopularity?
I think that, by and large, would have only contributed a small bit to his unpopularity, because what the main issue for the people, I believe, is how their lives are affected. This would certainly be, bring his image down a notch. But at the end of the day, I think the public or the general population wants to see what is in it for them. How has their life been impacted? How can things be better for them? And I think, all the two wars have created a big problem for everybody and for the entire world. And of course, certainly in the UK. And the NHS, particularly, many people have kept on, I've heard from many people that the NHS is in doldrums, and that, I think they can set that right. I think that would be at the top of the people's minds, that their health and economy and their energy needs should be fully met. So I think all those issues will be more important. And Rishi Sunak has handled two of them at least, and even illegal migration. It may not be popular, it may not be humane, as a lot of people are saying, but he has still taken steps to address the issue, which other people did not even want to look at. And I think all these do go in his favor, or in any prime minister's favor. He has taken steps to address the concerns and the problems of the people. I think do go. Right. Do give him some advantages. His personal, his personal issues, or his, these, I think they appear to be more technical. I think. I don't have the full details, but I think there is some, that would not bring down his popularity.
All right. The odds were stacked against Rishi Sunak. He did bite the bullet, but it seems it wasn't enough, for him to rescue the Tories from an impending disaster. At least that's what's being predicted by pundits and pollsters. But, of course, we will know the final outcome only once the votes have been counted. UK votes on the 4th of July. This is a story we'll continue to track closely here on Global Lens. On that note, Dr. Amlendu Mishra, Elizabeth Bro and Ambassador Manju Seth, thank you to all of you for joining me on the show tonight. All right, let's now get you some news from Asia. And, well, it is China versus Taiwan yet again. China has launched 2 days of large-scale military drills surrounding Taiwan and what it calls punishment for so-called separatist acts. Days after the self-ruling island swore in a new democratically elected leader who has called on Beijing to cease its intimidation tactics. As part of these drills, dozens of Chinese fighter jets carrying live ammunition have been conducting mock strikes against high-value military targets of the enemy, as they put it, alongside destroyers, frigates and missile speedboats. These exercises will encircle Taiwan and pose the first real test for the newly elected President Lai Ching-te as he attempts to manage relations with the island's powerful authoritarian neighbor. China's ruling Communist Party says Taiwan is part of its territory despite never having controlled it, and has vowed to take the island by force if necessary.
Taiwan mobilized its military on Thursday and said it was confident it could protect the island. That's after China the same morning started 2 days of what its military called punishment drills around Taiwan, which it said were both a response to, quote, separatist acts of Taiwan independence forces, as well as a, quote, stern warning against the interference and provocation by external forces. The exercises come just days after Lai Ching-te took office as Taiwan's new president, a man Beijing detests as a separatist. China's military said the drills involving the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Rocket Force are intended to test its forces' quote, joint real combat capabilities. Chinese state media said dozens of fighter jets carrying live missiles were sent out, along with warships, and conducted mock strikes on high-value military targets. They published a map of the drill zones in 5 areas all around Taiwan and the islands Taiwan controls near the Chinese coast. Taiwanese officials told Reuters those areas were outside its contiguous zone, which is 24 nautical miles from the main island's coast. Taiwan's defense ministry said that it had dispatched forces to areas around the island, and the presidential office condemned what it called China's unilateral military provocations. Lai has repeatedly offered talks with China, but been rebuffed. He rejects Beijing's sovereignty claims over the island and says only Taiwan's people can decide their future. China last staged large-scale war games near Taiwan in 2022 and 2023. It again ramped up military pressure on the island in the lead-up to Lai's inauguration, with fighter jets staging mock attacks on foreign vessels, while ships and planes encroached close to the island. Unlike similar exercises conducted in the past, China's military has classified this latest round of drills in a way that leaves room for potential follow-ups.
All right, let's now turn our attention to the United States. Former Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley has announced that she will vote for Donald Trump, her former opponent in the 2024 US presidential election, a man who she had described just a few weeks ago as being unqualified to be president. Haley, who previously served as Trump's United Nations ambassador, was the last significant rival to exit the GOP's primary race in early March. In her first public remarks since leaving the race, Haley said Trump has not been perfect, but she described President Joe Biden as a catastrophe. Now, anti-Trump Republicans had largely rallied behind Haley's presidential bid earlier this year, and her campaign continues to attract support even after her withdrawal from the race. She garnered over 20% of the vote in at least 2 state primaries in just the last 2 weeks. The Biden campaign is actively courting these Haley Republicans, who include a mix of moderates and college-educated independent voters, in the hope of swaying the election towards the Democrat. Biden argues that Trump has repeatedly indicated he does not want voters who supported Haley. Trump has repeatedly mocked Haley as a bird brain and expressed anger over her prolonged primary challenge. All right, now on to the ongoing Israel-Hamas war. Families of 7 female Israeli soldiers captured by Hamas during the 7th October attacks have released graphic footage of their abduction as they pile pressure on the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to secure their release. The video shows the women, all Israel Defense Forces personnel, lined up against a wall, their hands bound. The faces of some of the women are bruised and bloodied. The footage was previously released by Hamas, according to the Hostages Families Forum. The campaigning group obtained it from the IDF, which had previously edited the video to exclude the most disturbing scenes. The Hostage Families Forum has said, and I quote, "Every new testimony about what happened to the hostages echoes the same tragic truth. We must bring them all back home now." The women were kidnapped during a Hamas raid on Israel's Nahal Oz military base near the northern Gaza Strip as part of the terror group's attacks on Israel that left around 1,200 people dead and saw more than 250 captured and taken hostage. The kidnapped women were working as IDF observers, a role that involves monitoring Israel's border security. The video of their ordeal has been made public as pressure mounts on Netanyahu to secure the release of the Israelis who are still being held hostage by Hamas. Netanyahu has said their release is a key goal for his government. Numerous attempts to strike a hostage for ceasefire deal with Hamas have faltered in recent months, infuriating those in Israel campaigning for the return of the captives. The Hostages Families Forum says the state of Israel cannot accept a reality where its citizens constantly feel their lives are threatened and suffer from unrelenting fear and anxiety. With each passing day, it becomes more challenging to bring the hostages back home. The Israeli government must not waste another moment. It must return to the negotiating table today. Netanyahu has said he is horrified by the video, showing the abduction of our dear field observers, as he put it. He said, and I quote, "Israel will continue doing everything to bring them home, and the cruelty of Hamas terrorists only enhances my determination to fight forcefully until the destruction of Hamas to ensure what we've seen will never happen again." War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz said when he first watched the video, it made his stomach turn. However, Gantz added the responsibility of leaders is not only to look reality in the eye, it's also to create a different reality, even when it comes to difficult decisions, and that is our responsibility. And as we wrap up this edition of Global Lens, let's get you the latest on the funeral ceremonies that are taking place in Iran for the late President Ibrahim Raisi. Iran is now saying its final goodbye to President Raisi, who lost his life in a helicopter crash last Sunday. The nation is gripped by sorrow as well as controversy as the 63-year-old hardline cleric is laid to rest in his home city of Mashhad. Here's a detailed look at the unfolding events. Ibrahim Raisi's final journey is taking place now. He's being interred at the sacred Imam Riza shrine in Mashhad, I beg your pardon, the holiest site in Iran dedicated to the 8th Shia Imam. This location underscores his religious significance and the deep connection many Iranians felt with him. Television images show thousands gathered in the city's streets, reflecting a mix of mourning and political tension. The crash and its aftermath are also being widely debated in Iran. The helicopter crash that claimed Raisi's life took the lives of 7 others as well, including the country's foreign minister. This happened amid inclement weather conditions in Iran's mountainous northwest. Raisi and his entourage were en route to Tabriz after inaugurating 2 dams near the Azerbaijan border. The crash site and circumstances are currently under investigation. National and international reactions, of course, have been pouring in since news came in on Sunday night of the helicopter crash. Wednesday saw a significant commemorative event in Tehran attended by international dignitaries from Iran's allies and neighboring states. Acting President Mohammad Mukhber hosted the ceremony, standing in for Raisi until a new election is held on the 28th of June. Leaders from groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis that align with Iran's foreign policy have been in attendance, emphasizing the geopolitical impact of Raisi's death. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei personally led the prayers, highlighting Raisi's close ties to the upper echelons of Iran's power structure and his potential as Khamenei's successor. However, the absence of any Western officials at the ceremony speaks volumes about the strained ties between Iran and the West. While the Iranian government portrays the funeral processions as a display of national unity, the reality is more complex. Raisi's tenure was marred by widespread protests and brutal crackdowns. Many Iranians, especially those who participated in the Woman Life Freedom protests, harbored deep resentment towards Raisi for his role in suppressing dissent. His association with the 1980s Death Committee, which oversaw mass executions, remains a dark stain on his legacy. Economically, Raisi's presidency saw worsening conditions for many Iranians, further fueling public dissatisfaction. Despite the government's warnings against celebrating his death, the mixed reactions across Iran are quite palpable. And as Iran grieves, it also looks ahead to the future. As we said, the election is going to be held on the 28th of June, and it will be crucial in determining the next phase of the country's political landscape. The acting president, Mukhber, has the challenging task of steering the nation through this period of great uncertainty. The investigation, meanwhile, into the helicopter crash continues. The Bell 212 helicopter, a relic from a previous era, succumbed to adverse weather conditions, highlighting potential issues with Iran's aviation safety standards. The death of President Ibrahim Raisi has left an indelible mark on Iran, eliciting, as we said, a wide spectrum of emotions, and it has certainly set the stage for a pivotal election that is going to be held on the 28th of June, even as questions are also asked about who will succeed the supreme leader of Iran.
يسبحون بحمد ربهم وقضي بينهم بالحق.
We're leaving you with these images. Thanks for watching.
صدق الله العلي العظيم. الفاتحة. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
वो पूछते हैं कि हम कौन है गालिब, तुम बतलाओ कि हम बतलाएं क्या।
I told him, you do what you think is best, I will not insist.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Hello and welcome to the News 9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News 9 Plus. Let's look at the headlines first. Following outrage over quick grant of bail, the Maharashtra Juvenile Justice Board has remanded a 17-year-old youth allegedly involved in a car accident that claimed 2 lives in Pune to an observation home till June 5th. The Karnataka government has written to the Ministry of External Affairs seeking cancellation of the diplomatic passport issued to suspended Janata Dal secular MP Prajwal Revanna. Revanna, facing charges of sexually abusing multiple women, fled the country last month using his diplomatic passport. 3 hotels in Bengaluru have received bomb threats over email. Bomb squads and police teams were rushed to the hotels. On Wednesday, the Union Home Ministry's office in Delhi's North Block also received a bomb threat. Voting for Phase 6 of the Lok Sabha elections will be held in 58 constituencies on May 25th. The states and union territories include Delhi, Bihar, UP, Haryana, Jammu and Kashmir, Jharkhand, Odisha and West Bengal. With heavy rains lashing parts of Kerala, the Met Office has placed the state's Pathanamthitta and Idukki districts on red alert. The Indian Meteorological Department has issued a cyclone alert for Odisha, Gujarat, Maharashtra and West Bengal. Delhi has hit an extreme peak power demand of 8,000 megawatts. The latest peak surpassed the record set just a day ago, driven by an extreme heat wave. Former Union Minister and BJP MP Jayant Sinha said he was surprised to receive a show-cause notice from the party asking him why he didn't vote in the Lok Sabha polls. Sinha said he voted through postal ballot since he was overseas. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has called for a surprise general election in the UK on the 4th of July. Despite trailing in most opinion polls, Sunak is banking on getting inflation down to 2% to bounce back. Thousands marched in Iran on the final day of funeral rites for President Ibrahim Raisi, who was laid to rest in his hometown days after dying in a helicopter crash. Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar is in Tehran to participate in the memorial services. UK's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak called a snap general election to be held on the 4th of July. In a statement from Downing Street, Sunak said he spoke to King Charles earlier that day to request the dissolution of Parliament for a general election. Now, since he became the Prime Minister less than 2 years back, Sunak has managed to steady the economy, but he hasn't been able to boost the Conservatives' popularity with the public. Added to that is the global cost of living crisis. As he heads into the election, we are asking, can Rishi Sunak win? To discuss this, let me start by introducing my guests for the show. Joining me to discuss this are Ambassador YK Sinha, former Indian High Commissioner to the UK, Indrani Bagchi, CEO Ananta Aspen Centre, Dr. Neeraj Patil, who joins us from the UK. He's the chairman of Hindus for Labour, and of course my colleague R. Sridharan here in the News 9 Plus studio. Welcome to the News 9 Plus show. I want to start by asking Indrani this. Indrani, the picture of Rishi Sunak standing outside 10 Downing Street in the pouring rain reminded me of Sharad Pawar about 5 years back doing the same thing in Maharashtra when he had his back to the wall. He addressed that rally in Maharashtra, in the pouring rain. He was rewarded for it. Will this work for Rishi Sunak?
One doesn't know. The chips are almost all stacked against him and the Tories. He could have had an autumn election, which was what was planned. He went on a gamble. This is nothing short of a gamble. And I think he gambled on the fact that inflation figures came down to 2.3% yesterday morning. But the party is demoralized. The party has been losing local elections. Labour is enthused. And things haven't been going well for the Tories for some time. So one doesn't know whether this is a gamble that will pay off, or will it be the inevitable? Will it be a debate about how much will he lose by?
Right. Is it going to be a debate about how much he'll lose by? Shri, you've been tracking Rishi Sunak very closely over the last 2 years. Tell us what he's up against. And, how did a Indian origin Prime Minister, of course, that's one of the main reasons we are looking at Rishi Sunak so closely. How did he lose the plot in the last 2 years? Why is he so unpopular?
Well, I don't think it's fair to pin the blame entirely on Rishi Sunak, Sandeep, because he's been in power only for 2 years. But the fact that the Conservatives haven't had a really good handle on the Prime Minister leadership issue, within the party. And the fact that the global economic conditions weren't really good. We had inflation going up. UK was in technical recession. The second half of 2023, it's just come out of it. Interest rates were very high. Inflation was high. So I guess there are a lot of factors which also added to the, let's say, people's disaffection with the Conservative Party. So I guess these are all the reason why he's obviously chosen to call for an early election. Otherwise, it shouldn't have happened until the end of this year. Is that he sees that this is probably the best chance for Conservative to make some sort of a claim in front of people and say, okay, we can fix the problems that you've been facing. And one thing he's been consistently saying against Labour Party is that they don't have a clear plan in terms of how they want to fix the economy. So, to be fair to him, we haven't really heard much from Keir Starmer by way of the actual details. Well, there are broader points that he's come up with. I'm sure they'll be working out the details. But as of now, I think there is some case that Rishi Sunak can make, saying that they don't have a clear plan, but I have. Vote for me. But whether that actually translates into votes and whether he wins, I don't think at this point there is any indication that Rishi Sunak or the Tories are going to come back to power.
All right. Doesn't look like the Tories are coming back to power. Ambassador Sinha, you've been in the UK for many years. You've looked at the politics there very closely. How did the Conservatives so completely lose the plot? Was it a combination of the global factors, as Shri was mentioning? Is it to do with the fact that they've not had a really charismatic leader, of the kind that they had in the past? Like everyone looks towards Margaret Thatcher. What is the problem really? And what is it that Rishi Sunak is really fighting now?
I think it's a combination of factors, as the previous speakers have mentioned. But I think what is important to realize is that in the last 8 years, the Tories have had 4 prime ministers. They've gone through, if I could call it, the misery of Brexit. On the 23rd of June 2016, they voted for Brexit. And on the 31st of January 2020, they were out of the EU. And that had severe economic consequences. I think people are appreciating it now. They've just emerged from shallow recession, a growth of 0.6%, and as Indrani mentioned, inflation 2.3%. But that's just a drop in the water, really. Some clinging on to straws, I would think. As far as Mr. Sunak is concerned, he's a very bright politician who is actually filled with a very difficult job. In many ways, he was the fall guy of the Tories, because if you remember, his predecessors, particularly Liz Truss, had actually really cleared the pitch for the Tories. And Boris Johnson before that, despite being a charismatic leader, unfortunately, especially during COVID, attracted a lot of criticism. So I think the economy in one hand, the handling of COVID to some extent, and of course, anti-incumbency, 14 years in power and having changed so many captains midway. So I think obviously all this counts. And if you look at their record, the last elections, they won 365 seats.
Yes.
And before that, a snap election by Theresa May, and actually they had reduced their majority from 330 to 314. So I think the Labour Party itself is organized much better now under Keir Starmer. Under his predecessor, of course, there was a lot of disaffection and there were problems. But I think the Labour Party has got its act together, and they're putting a serious challenge to the Tories. So obviously, Mr. Sunak has a very tough task ahead of him.
That is a semi-permanent dye called the indelible ink.
We are the sole manufacturers of this indelible ink.
Don't try to repair something which is working.
And if you have facial recognition, you can go vote in any booth anywhere based on where you are, and then it will be recorded that you can't vote anywhere else again.
Can we retire indelible ink and use biometrics? Theoretically, my answer would be yes.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
How do you fulfill that promise? Because ultimately expectations have to be met. If you look at the political landscape, is it really changing for women? And what is the inability of the forces that dead bodies surface but not the living people?
Forever there are simultaneous election of parliament, assembly and municipality and panchayat. So that framework has to be given in the constitution. That amendment has been suggested.
Are you going to take away the power of dissolution?
I mean, it doesn't require any rocket science to do this. It's a simple constitutional amendment, and the idea is everything goes together.
The Law Commission has set the ball rolling for one nation, one election. Basically, if all goes well, then India may see simultaneous elections to Lok Sabha, state assemblies, municipalities and panchayats in 2029.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Rishi Sunak has a tough task ahead of him, as Ambassador Sinha mentioned, and I want to come to Dr. Patil, who's joining us from the UK. Dr. Patil, I must ask you this: ab ki baar Starmer Sarkar, is this going to be all set? Is Labour all set to take over?
Yes, so 100%. I wouldn't even say 99%. I would say 100%. It's going to be a Labour government.
Right.
But we must, as a British Indian,
yes,
I also celebrate the fact that we had a first black ethnic minority Prime Minister of Britain, and Rishi Sunak as a Prime Minister, I think he did a decent job.
Right.
And the challenge for him is, whether he will lose by a few runs or whether he loses by an innings defeat.
Right.
That's the challenge.
Oh, okay. Right. I think innings defeat or a couple of runs. But Sri, this calling for early elections reminds me of the India shining moment of the NDA 20 years back, where the NDA actually believed it was on a winning wicket and it called for early elections.
True.
And the results are known to us, and it's the Indians who are left standing in the sun for the summer elections. I think it's the first time the UK has called for such early elections.
That's
first time
true.
since 1945. But he's gone out on a limb and a prayer with that very narrow margin of the inflation figures, actually, that he hopes that will kind of get him through. But tell us about the other policies that he's really followed. If you look at him from an Indian perspective, if you were the parent of an Indian student wanting to study in the UK, Rishi Sunak wouldn't be the best, Indian origin Prime Minister.
True.
He tried to abolish the thing.
I mean, his stance on immigration has been controversial.
Yes.
The biggest being the move to send refugees to Rwanda, to ship them out to Rwanda, pay Rwanda money and get them to keep them.
Right.
But I think as far as Neeraj Patel talked about Keir Starmer.
Yes.
I mean, Keir Starmer is an interesting person. If you look at him, he was really a leftist when he began his career.
Yes.
He's a lawyer by education. People say he's methodical, but as lawyers go, he's also a little, not as flamboyant as, let's say, Rishi Sunak, handsome young man, investment banker. But I think what he now brings to the table is a promise to end what he calls the Tory chaos of 14 years.
Yes.
So I think that's the promise, and that message, and elections are all about messaging.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I think that one line seems to be resonating with the British people, and I think that itself may be enough to give the Labour Party some sort of an edge.
Yes.
The real economic issues, whether Labour can come in and fix it, is like anyone's guess, because the best forecast for the UK economic growth is 2% in the long term.
Yes.
So it's not going to, like, any party is going to come and suddenly whip up the growth to 5-6%. That's not going to happen.
Right.
But it's a question of, can you keep inflation down?
Yes.
Can you keep interest rates down? I mean, that's the stability which the Aam Aadmi of UK expects from a government.
Right.
And I think if let's say the Labour Party is able to do that, then I think they'll be in.
Yeah. It looks like it's Labour from all accounts. But Indrani, I must ask you this. For the last 3 or 4 years, there's been talk of this India-UK trade deal, and it was almost like a QED that after Brexit, India would be the preferred trade partner for the UK. What has really held this up in the last few years? And you think that if there is a Labour government, Keir Starmer, would they push for this India-UK trade deal the way the Conservatives did in the last few years?
Probably not. And I think there has been a lot of effort, certainly between India and the UK to complete this agreement before the Conservatives give up power, because I think the writing has been on the wall for some time. It's been held up for a number of actually very few reasons, but it's not done until it's done. So I think we just have to give up on this, because with a Labour government, the emphasis will be different, the priorities will be different. So we in many ways have to start from scratch, unless between now and the 4th of July, somehow both countries can head to the finish line.
Right. Literally, given the fact that we are in election mode as well, Sri, and that is very unlikely.
Very unlikely, because both Rishi Sunak is clearly in the election mode, and the whole country is in election mode already.
India
July 4th is not far away at all. So I don't think it's going to happen at all.
Right. But the interesting thing here, Sri, is the choice of 4th of July. Isn't that US Independence Day when the US declared independence from the UK? Why did you choose the 4th of July?
So one theory for that is, of course, the economic part, but the other theory is that don't forget that the US is going to election later this year. I mean, November we'll get to know.
Everybody is in election mode this year.
So I think there is some sort of pact between US and UK that both the countries should not be facing elections at the same time.
Right.
So that's one of the theories why.
Okay, that's interesting. Because so Atlantic cousins kind of stagger the elections.
It's not strategically advisable for the two countries to be caught up with their own internal issues at the same time.
Not to mention Russia.
And when there's so much happening.
Russia on their doorstep.
Russia, plus there's so much happening in the Middle East.
Yes.
So I think there was some sort of maybe that also played a role. Although I would err on the side of like the economic, the upswing which a mild upswing which Britain is witnessing. On the
inflation
growth.
is down.
Yeah, exactly. I
2%.
think from a political point of view, I think that probably was a bigger a driver of the decision to go for a snap election July 4th.
4th of July.
That could have also been a factor.
That's right. Interesting point of view there. But ambassadors, what do we know about Labour? I mean, Indrani just kind of pricked the balloon there when she said there's not going to be an India-UK trade deal. What do we know about Labour's attitude towards India, and what can we expect from Keir Starmer? How have you've seen him closely? What's your assessment of him, Keir Starmer Prime Ministership?
Before I answer your question, may I just address 2 points quickly? One,
absolutely,
immigration issue. I think what we must, as Indians,
yes,
Indian students, parents of Indian students and Indian students themselves, be very mindful of is the attempt to scrap the 2-year post-study visa.
Yes.
That, in my opinion, a retrograde step.
Right.
Because the UK would be losing a lot of money. They earn about over 25 billion pounds
yes.
from international students. And Indians are going to be the most affected.
Right.
So I hope policy doesn't go through. And the second point on the India-UK trade deal.
Yes.
While the Conservatives really pushed it, I think the Labour Party will not abandon it simply because it will be good for them. Because if a trade deal that is a mutually win-win situation, and I hope that's what happens,
right.
then it boosts UK exports into
yes.
India, which are actually lagging behind because we have a favourable balance of trade.
Right.
But having said that, of course, till the last screws turn, until the last sort of I is dotted, we really won't know whether we will have a trade deal before 4th of July. And
yes.
if we don't, then hopefully we might
right.
have a good deal after.
Right.
But as far as the Labour attitude and the question that you asked,
yes.
I think the Labour attitude towards India has been actually it's very surprising. It's not very surprising because constituency pressure. We know what constituency
right.
pressure has. Labour has been taking a very, I would say, even an anti-India stand on
right.
issues of more importance to us in the past.
Yes.
And remember, I go hard back to Robin Cook,
yes,
where Queen Elizabeth was, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth was coming to India.
Right.
They stayed on Kashmir, really,
yes.
where you had David Miliband
right.
talking in the similar vein. And then Jeremy Corbyn, he in fact was influenced by a large number of people from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, Mirpur in particular,
yes.
and Pakistan, and their positions, their resolutions,
right.
Not favorably inclined towards India on one hand, and then you had members of parliament who were hardline Sikhs,
yes.
who were espousing, if not espousing, at least sympathetic to the separatist cause. So I think we would need to be very careful. I think Sir Keir Starmer is obviously done a very good swing back to a position which we would be more comfortable with. Right. But I think time will tell when Labour is in power, because don't forget that there is a certain area in the Midlands and Birmingham,
yes.
Manchester, etc., which actually, I don't have the exact figure in my time, there were 11 members right. of parliament representing that constituency I referred to and calling or influencing Labour Party opinions and views yes. on the subcontinent. So I think we will have to be careful, very watchful, and see how things emerge. I do hope that we will have a very productive relationship,
right.
and people like the judge will help us in achieving that.
Right. I'm going to ask that question to Dr. Patil. Since you're a member of the Labour Party, Dr. Patil, what can India expect from a Labour government, a Keir Starmer government? As Ambassador Sinha was saying, Labour has not been too friendly in the past.
See, let me clarify. It's a two-way process. So the thing is, I chair Hindus for Labour, and why Labour Party started as Hindus for Labour was in 2019 during
yes.
the tenure of Jeremy Corbyn.
Yes.
The Labour Party policy shifted was anti-India,
yes.
and so then a motion was passed at the Labour Party conference that led to a lot of Hindus quitting the Labour Party.
Right.
Now, the current Labour administration want Hindus and Muslims together in the Labour Party. So, and Labour Party wants good bilateral relations between India and Pakistan.
Yes.
And that's the key thing. So,
right.
I hope the Indian administration that takes takes power on 5th of June,
yes.
Emphasizes that, the good, emphasizes on good bilateral relations between India and Pakistan. Not only
yes.
that, also good, relations between various religious communities in India
right.
as well.
Right.
It is very, very important.
Absolutely.
That ink is a semi-permanent dye called the indelible ink.
We are the sole manufacturer of this indelible ink.
Don't try to repair something which is working.
And if you have facial recognition, you can go vote in any booth anywhere based on where you are, and then it will be recorded that you can't vote anywhere else again.
Can we retire indelible ink and use biometrics? Theoretically, my answer would be yes.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Start with the end in mind. You need to know where you want to reach. Every morning that we wake up, we are exercising our choice. The destiny is decided. The results are known that I'm going to win. Life of a goalkeeper is something which has always intrigued me. When you come into a stadium, this is the highest level of pressure. When I set out to do something, I decide in my mind that failure is not an option.
What you feel very strongly about, those are the stories to tell.
I have a mind which is absolutely restless. Mind and body are entangled sensations. That brings me back to golf. It's an amazing game.
This is not a perfect game. You only learn from them.
If you have a formula to a success, then you can replicate it.
I feel this is my first step. I'm starting now.
Winner is first born in the mind. I think, therefore I am. We are all about our mind.
World premiere every Saturday on News 9 Live at 9 p.m.
America, there is an inheritance tax. In India, you don't have that.
कांग्रेस की लूट जिंदगी के साथ भी और जिंदगी के बाद भी.
Our manifesto combines ideology with effective administration, with delivery that is long overdue.
Rahul Gandhi is talking about redistribution of wealth. These are the things people are alert to. They want to know, what does Congress say when you say redistribute wealth?
Forever there are simultaneous election of Parliament, Assembly and Municipality and Panchayat. So that framework has to be given in the Constitution. That amendment has been suggested.
Are you going to take away the power of dissolution?
I mean, it doesn't require any rocket science to do this. It's a simple constitutional amendment, and the idea is everything goes together.
The Law Commission has set the ball rolling for one nation, one election. Basically, if all goes well, then India may see simultaneous elections to Lok Sabha, state assemblies, municipalities and panchayats in 2029.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Why is the state not looking at putting an embargo on that?
As a Telangana person, I will not accept.
How do ordinary folks deal with this?
Sri, you have a point there.
Yeah. So, one thing we should remember is that while Keir Starmer did, earn his spurs under Jeremy Corbyn, the fact that he moved the party away from ultra-left to more towards center. Now, that's something which, even some people in the Labour Party are not happy with.
Right.
They think that he's abandoning our, ultra-left stance. But I think we can expect a very pragmatic, approach from Keir Starmer, because ultimately he's a lawyer.
Yes.
He's going to be fairly balanced in terms of approach, and that's already, in many occasions he's already displayed that. And to Dr. Patil's point, he even went and inaugurated the statue of Lord Basaveshwara,
Yes.
a renowned sage from Karnataka,
Yeah.
which, even our Prime Minister went and unveiled it at Dr. Patil's invitation.
Yes.
So I think he will display a lot of pragmatism, and
Right.
and India is now at a point where, it's a counterbalance to a lot, China.
That's right.
So,
yeah.
in terms of India being an economic sweet spot,
Yes.
and being strategically important for the Western world, I don't think Keir Starmer is going to forget that.
Yes.
So that will pretty much be, the center point of their engagement with India.
The Five Eyes strategy.
Absolutely. So I think he will adopt a very pragmatic approach.
He'll be a pragmatic Prime Minister. And but going back to Rishi Sunak, who's literally fighting with his back to the wall, what do you think his mother-in-law would advise him, given the fact that she's also in Parliament now, in the Rajya Sabha? Sudha Murthy.
Well, I wish I could read Sudha Murthy's mind, but I know that Mrs. Murthy is a very, very smart, accomplished
Yes.
woman. And I guess she'll probably just advise him, take the public's decision with grace, whatever
Right.
it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the, ethos of a democracy.
Absolutely. And he'll live on to fight another day because
Absolutely.
he's really young and he's a long way to go. But thank you very much for that great discussion. Indrani Bagchi, Ambassador Sinha, Dr. Patil and my colleague Sridhar Ramakrishnan. Rishi Sunak, can he win? We'll know in July. Delhi has submitted an application to the International Seabed Authority to explore the seabed in the Indian Ocean. Now, India had applied for the license in January and a decision is expected by the end of this year. Why does India want to explore the Indian Ocean seabed, and which are the other countries in this race? Joining me to discuss this is Commander Arnab Das, Director of the Maritime Research Centre. Commander Das, welcome to the News 9 Plus show.
Thank you for having me here.
Why is India involved in a race to the seabed?
There are multiple factors. First of all, definitely the resources that are available. I mean, whether it is energy security or various other, from the strategic security perspective also, we need to build those capabilities to be able to, maintain our presence in the underwater.
Right.
6 times more resources for the EV is available in the deep oceans.
Right.
So definitely
Electric vehicles.
Electric vehicles.
Yes.
And also, the polymetallic nodules. From an energy security perspective, there are methane and so many other things that are available. And Government of India is definitely focusing in the Indian Ocean region now.
Yes.
Because we have not explored it so much earlier. But now there is so much to be done. So definitely there's a very focused approach towards it.
So, I've been hearing about polymetallic nodules ever since I was in school, Commander Das. And, I know the fact that they are potato-sized lumps of minerals that are found on the seabed at depths between 4 and 6 kilometers.
Yes.
Explain to our viewers the complexity of getting those nodules from the seabed. I would argue of developing something like a vacuum cleaner and running it on the seabed and sucking it up and using the minerals. But tell us why it's not as easy as it sounds.
There are 2 parts to it. One is the exploration and the second is the exploitation.
Right.
So, as you know, the tropical waters.
Yes.
Which
is the Indian Ocean, the warmer waters.
Also,
yes.
The tropical waters, the warm waters as we call it, the sonars that are used, sonars were typically designed and developed during the Cold War period for the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap.
Yes.
Those are the temperate and the polar region.
Right.
The same sonar, when you bring it here, gives you 60% degraded performance.
Yes.
So right from an exploration perspective itself, there's a massive challenge that, to be able to find. The second aspect is the viability of such an activity.
Right.
Experts say that if you do not have enough resources to be able to exploit it for at least 15 to 20 years, it's not economically viable.
Right. By viability, you mean that your return on investment should be higher.
Return on investment. Because when you set up this whole thing, it's a serious issue.
Right. How many billions of dollars are we talking of here? How much would it?
I don't want to guess a number.
Right. But it would be in the billions.
It would be a very massive number.
And it would be. Is it more complicated than oil exploration or digging for oil?
Far more.
And why is that the case?
Because as you mentioned, breaking it up into smaller parts. What people are looking at is because you have to bring it out and in large numbers.
Right.
So what they are looking at it is crushing it into into smaller parts and making a sludge which can be sucked up.
Right.
So that itself, will require a different way of working.
So the difference between oil exploration and polymetallic nodules is that the nodules are small, but they're scattered on the seabed.
Yes.
Whereas oil, you just hit that thing and you can pump out the oil.
Pump it out.
Right.
So they are, for both, rare earth metals and this, they are looking at it to be pulled out.
Right.
So that requires a very different capability.
Yes.
Then also there is now a concern. International Seabed Authority is also fighting an issue of environmental sustainability.
Yes.
So unless that is established, and certain countries, which are opposing this.
Right.
When people who missed the bus
Yes.
in the beginning in terms of this whole seabed mining requirement.
So why are those countries opposing the seabed mining? Is
Because
it because
they
of
were not part of the initial thing. Now,
Right.
they want to, make sure that others also don't get it.
Right.
So they are opposing, you have messed up the earth enough now.
Yes, and now you're
don't,
going to the
mess up
seabed.
the waters.
Right.
And because it will be very difficult to, because see, in land, it remains contained in a smaller area.
Yes.
But in the oceans, it will spread.
Right.
And
The
it will be
damage
very
would be
difficult.
far
The
more
damage will be far more
widespread.
So it will be extremely difficult to ensure. And when we look at environment impact assessment, there are multiple dimensions to
Yes.
it. I mean, one is, which is not very much well known, is the acoustic habitat degradation.
Right.
Because underwater, speed of sound is 5 times faster.
Yes.
So, and the underwater creatures, I mean, largely
Yes.
the marine mammals and such creatures are dependent on sound for biologically critical functions.
Right.
So, if you create a lot of noise because of these human activities,
Absolutely.
it will cause a serious environmental damage.
Serious
so,
environmental
that's something we need to factor.
Right.
So,
And
even the whole environment impact assessment
Yes.
has to be looked at it from a very different dimension.
Can the Trinamool candidate from Baharampur hit the ball out of the park?
50-60 दिन बहुत ज़्यादा बोल रहा हूँ, उससे पहले ही काम दिखने स्टार्ट हो जाएंगे.
Pitted opposite Pathan in Team BJP is Dr. Nirmal Kumar Saha.
The fight is not Adit Chaudhary and Nirmal Saha. The fight between Modi versus Rahul Gandhi.
Yusuf Pathan and Nirmal Saha, two professionals who have switched to politics, are taking on Congress leader Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary. Can one of the first-time politicians end his winning streak?
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
जानना है तो देखिए, समझना है तो सुनिए, सीखना है तो पूछिए, और कमाना है तो खरीदिए। जानकारी, सलाह और निवेश सब एक ही सुपर ऐप पर। पैसे का सवाल है तो जवाब है मनी 9। आजादी पैसे की, अभी डाउनलोड करें।
America, there is an inheritance tax. In India, you don't have that.
कांग्रेस की लूट जिंदगी के साथ भी और जिंदगी के बाद भी.
Our manifesto combines ideology with effective administration, with delivery that is long overdue.
Rahul Gandhi is talking about redistribution of wealth. These are the things people are alert to. They want to know, what does Congress say when you say redistribute wealth?
$20,000 people dead and counting. What's happening in the United States of America is unprecedented. You will have to pay for this.
Commander Das, also the fact that, let's talk about the dragon in the room. And China has been very actively scouring the Indian Ocean region. They've been sending these surveillance ships, spy ships, oceanographic survey vessels. Tell us about the missions of these ships. I mean, are they there, apart from the missile test, we know that, but are they also there for extracting resources from the seabed?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I've been talking about when I say underwater domain awareness. The pooling of resources and synergizing of efforts is something we need to look at very seriously, because these are very high stake and high resource intensive initiatives.
Yes.
So unless all the four stakeholders, whether it is strategic security, blue economy, sustainability and environment, sustainability and climate change, and the digital or the science and technology effort, unless all of them come together, it won't make sense, or it will not be optimum enough.
All the stakeholders
need to come together. So China is trying to do that. See, even mapping the underwater space, for AUV development, we need very high quality and high resolution images, or high charts. China is doing that. So whether it will be used for deploying AUVs to find resources, or for strategic security deployment, once the country has the data, it's their
dual
asset.
use technology.
It is certainly dual use.
And
Anything underwater is dual use.
Data is also dual use. But my last question to you, Commander Das, is that what would you expect from the new government? The seabed, the underwater domain has not been a very high priority region for the government, but given the factors that you just explained to us, the fact that China is also involved in this race in our backyard, what would you want the new government to do in terms of policy, in terms of bringing all these multiple stakeholders together?
See, I want to highlight Honorable Prime Minister, moment he came to power, way back in May 2015, he announced the Sagar Vision.
Sagar Vision, yes.
What is Sagar Vision? I mean, security and growth for all in the region. So both security and economy or economic growth has been put on the same priority level. Number one. And secondly, he also talked about leadership role for India in the region. So you can only look at leadership role if you have the capacity and capability. And if you can support the other nations in the region in terms of their capacity and capability building. And every time, whether Prime Minister has spoken at the UN, or every time he has repeated this priority of the oceans, and even in the G20 declaration also they have used the word ocean economy. They have not used the word blue economy. The blue economy policy is almost ready, as I understand. In the last 3 years they have debated the draft blue economy policy. So the government is definitely looking at it, but being given the size of our country and the various factors, priorities, we need to. But my submission to the government, I mean the next government which is going to be coming soon, would be that capacity capability building should be the highest priority. Making a declaration is one aspect, but to be able to make sure that we achieve that, and the kind of underlying capacity and capability, and particularly when we say underwater, acoustic capacity capability building is the key. I mean, even under the MDA, Maritime Domain Awareness, the underwater part is completely not seen.
Absolutely.
So
the underwater
we need
part
to
is not
focus.
seen. But thank you very much, Commander Das, for alerting us about this, the fact that we need to build up capability and capacity in the underwater domain for the reasons that you mentioned. The Nifty has hit a record high. It's 22,800 as of today. The Sensex is up 600 points. This pre-election rally that has propelled the stock market to record market capitalization of $5 trillion is not enough, says Prime Minister Modi. In an interview to Business Daily, he said, "I can say with confidence that on the 4th of June, as the BJP hits record numbers, the stock market will also hit new record highs." So is the market bullish on Prime Minister Modi? Talking about this, I have with me here Mr. Amit Kumar Gupta, founder FinTrek Capital, and my colleague Suyash Maheshwari in the studio at News 9 Plus. Welcome to the News 9 Plus show. Mr. Gupta, I want to just read out these facts. Gold is at an all-time high, real estate is at an all-time high, stocks are at an all-time high. All asset classes are booming. Has this happened before, or is this the first time you're seeing this kind of rally?
It has happened before also. In the last part of the 2008 rally, we also saw similar patterns. Even briefly in 2020, after the COVID stimulus was there, we again saw till 2021 October, November that all the asset classes were rallying together. It has happened before also. Though the reasons for every time the rally happens could differ.
It could differ at some point. But how, Suyash, you've been looking at the markets very closely. How linked is this with the prospects of the government coming to power? a second term.
It's actually very much linked with how and when what the final tally is going to look like. Sandeep, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I think elections overall are one of the most volatile times for the stock markets, because this after all brings uncertainty into the system. Because elections after all is a binary event, whether the incumbent government will come back to power or not. I think in the context of our country, it's not as much a question of whether they will come back to power or what the final tally is going to
the numbers.
So back in December, after BJP's thumping victory in the assembly elections, the market participants and the community alike, they were expecting, they were factoring in a strong 400 plus seat win for the BJP government. But as we got closer to the elections, that expectation of a 400 plus final tally got thinner and thinner. Just on April 9th, for instance, since April 9th actually, just 10 days before polling began in India for the 2024 elections, Nifty has in that, in the month and a half, has risen 1,000 points, fallen 1,000 points, risen 1,000 points again, and again we are back at all-time high levels. So what has happened in that time frame? Again, BJP and actually the market participants were factoring in a very strong victory for the BJP government of 400 plus, but then as the expectations got the slighter and slighter, got compressed, the market started recalibrating itself. So since the start of May, after that first few phases of election, because of the lower voter turnout, the market overall was disappointing. They recalibrated that number to about 350 to 340 for the NDA government on the whole. But in the second phase of elections, as more and more northern states started going to polls, and the voter turnout significantly improved, not to mention the assurance given by the Prime Minister, Mr. Amit Shah and Mr. Jai Shankar, that the markets are going to rally, and they are also expecting a big victory for their government. The markets have once again started on their bull run, and we have made a record high today. Nifty is very close to 23,000 mark, just about 7 points shy of it actually. Sensex is back above 75,000 day, but overall the markets are going to be very volatile in the next couple of weeks.
Overall, the markets are going to be very volatile. But Mr. Gupta, does India Inc. really care if the numbers are 272 or if it's 400 plus? Just as long as the government comes back to power, isn't that enough? I mean, because the government seems to have done pretty well with 270, 282 and then later to 303. So how much of an impact do these numbers really make for the markets?
Not much. I think these are more for discussion purposes and speculation purposes just before the elections. Once the elections are over, the contours of the new governments are in place in June. The focus will clearly shift to the presentation of a full budget in July. Along with that, how the taxation changes if it happens. The current government has been very vocal about the need for a state duty or inheritance tax. So there has been always a fear factor in all the budgets in the last 5-6 years. They have also defended long-term capital gains and dividend tax. So as a result, in the past decade, since 2014, the effective personal taxation rates have always remained high, and the direct tax code is expected to remove even more exemptions in the coming years. So I think the markets may feel a little euphoric going into the elections, and if the number comes in majority, whether it is 272 or whether it is more than 300, we might see a euphoric move up, then a corrective move down, as the budget may not enthuse the market participants and earnings sort of fail to justify some of the lofty valuations currently. Even in the current earnings season, what we are seeing is that there are more downgrades than upgrades. Almost 60% of the companies in Nifty 500 have been downgraded. So we are not trading very cheap going into the elections. I think the pre-election rally has already happened. And the earnings which will come may not justify some of the very expensive valuations we have. So we could have a period of consolidation in the next 1.5 months till the budget is up.
Before I come to Suyash, I'm going to ask you these 5 expectations that you would have from the new government, whichever government comes to power after the 4th of June. 5 expectations.
So see, I think, in general, I have always held the view that, most of the governments, whether it has been the Congress government with the UPA 1 and the UPA 2 between 2004 and 2014, or whether it has been the NDA government between 2014 and 2024. All of them have, the pace and the direction of the economic growth has always been, towards the growth agenda and towards a populist agenda. And I don't think that will change very materially. Some of the good things which have been done in the NDA 1 and 2, like the PLI schemes or the defense opportunities which have opened up, I expect them, to sort of go on and not make any changes. There could be changes in how some of the schemes getting merged or optimizing at the state and the center levels. But I don't see anything, anything major happening where the fiscal will be disturbed. In fact, the dividend which RBI has declared, that has sort of eased out the fiscal deficit path for the next couple of years as well. So as of now, I have not many extraordinary expectations from the new government. I just feel that the existing policy will continue, but I will be a little skeptical on the taxation part. How that sort of evolves over the next sort of one year.
Right, absolutely. But Suyash, what if there was an upset, a surprise on the 4th of June? How the markets react to that?
Yes, I think Mr. Gupta presents a contrarian sort of view. I think a more popular narrative that, at least from what I am hearing, talking to experts day in, day out, is that there will be a big impact in the market if there is, outsized win or a loss for the BJP government. Let's say in scenario 1, BJP and NDA government is not able to, rake in more than 300 seats. The market will see a 5 to 10% fall. The upside is not as much. If there is a 400 plus sort of a victory, which the market had, remember, previously anticipated, we won't see that outside sort of an impact. That would come if there is a major disappointment overall. But just to add to that, there are other multiple factors at play that the market, because of which the markets have rallied, because India overall has found itself in a Goldilocks sort of a situation. Overall, our economy is doing superbly well. GDP growth has been rather strong in the first 2 quarters of this calendar year, and also inflation is coming off nicely, whereas in other countries, you look at China, their market has, because of the property crisis going on over there, has been moving pretty much sideways or in the negative trajectory for the past 2 years. As Mr. Gupta also pointed out, we are currently commanding a premium. For example, the price to earnings on Indian markets is currently at about 25. PE is 25, whereas China is currently valued at 10. So we are at 2.5 times, or more than that, expensive than Chinese market. But there is a reason to it, because economy is doing well, inflation is coming, off
fastest
nicely.
growing major economy in the world.
Definitely, sir.
Yeah, right. So that's one big reason for the markets to be really optimistic, bullish on Modi. You just heard it from our experts here on the News 9 Plus show. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Gupta and my colleague Suyash Maheshwari. The United States has blamed Russia for launching a spacecraft capable of attacking satellites in orbit. Earlier this year, the US had sparked off panic when it said Russia was developing a type of nuclear anti-satellite weapon. Why is Russia launching space weapons? News 9 Plus decodes.
Russia has launched a satellite with the capability of taking down other satellites. Pentagon spokesperson Brigadier General Pat Ryder said, adding that it was on the same orbit as a US government satellite. Russia, in turn, accused the US of deploying weapons in space. The two global rivals have repeatedly clashed over the issue of space weapons in the past. Is space the final frontier, turning into an arena for military confrontation? How are the US and Russia weaponizing space? News 9 Plus decodes. Let's begin with what the latest spat between the US and Russia all about. According to the Pentagon, Russia launched the Cosmos 2576 satellite on May 16, which the US believes is a counter-space weapon capable of attacking other satellites. Cosmos 2576 shares the same orbit as a US government satellite, the USA 314. The US has been monitoring Russian satellite activities for some time now and claims that Russia launched similar counter-space payloads in 2019 and 2022. Russia has so far not commented on US claims. However, the Russian space agency Roscosmos has confirmed that the satellite launched was for the Defense Ministry's interest. Over the last few weeks, the US and Russia have repeatedly clashed at the UN over space weaponization, with both sides vetoing each other's proposals aimed at preventing an arms race in outer space. Why are superpowers anxious about weapons in space? To understand this, one can examine the role of Elon Musk's Starlink in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Starlink has provided essential communication infrastructure to Ukrainian forces. It has facilitated real-time coordination, drone operations, and precise artillery targeting, ensuring command continuity despite Russian attacks on communication networks. Starlink's reliability and adaptability have significantly enhanced Ukraine's military effectiveness and resilience. In future wars, space will be a critical domain for national security due to its role in communications, navigation, and surveillance. The deployment of counter-space weapons could disrupt satellite operations, affecting both civilian and military infrastructures globally. What does the space arms race look like? Weaponization of space can transform military strategies, with global powers developing counter-space capabilities. Although no anti-satellite weapon systems, or ASATs, have been used in warfare, several countries including China, India, Russia, and the United States have successfully tested direct ascent ASATs as shows of force. Direct ascent ASATs are essentially missiles that can target satellites in orbit. The US launched the first anti-satellite missile way back in January 1984, with a successful interception the next year in 1985. Russia, on the other hand, adopted the Soviet Union's co-orbital method, where a killer satellite enters the same orbit as its target and approaches it for termination. So is war in space inevitable? In 1967, the Outer Space Treaty banning placing nuclear weapons or any weapons of mass destruction in space. But that treaty no longer appears to be effective. Both US and Russia have submitted competing non-proliferation proposals to the UN, and both of these proposals have failed. The weaponization of space poses big risks for global security and stability, highlighting the need for effective international cooperation and governance. How nations navigate these challenges will shape the future of space as a domain for human activity, both peaceful and military.
वो पूछते हैं कि हम कौन है गालिब, तुम बतलाओ कि हम बतलाएं क्या।
I told him, you do what you think is best, I will not insist.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
The game of power politics has begun. The poll bugle has been sounded. Who will receive the death blow? Who will be checkmated? It still remains to be seen.
ये दिखाता है हर कार्यकर्ता का बुलंद हौसला।
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Start with the end in mind. You need to know where you want to reach. Every morning that we wake up, we are exercising our choice. The destiny is decided. The results are known that I'm going to win. Life of a goalkeeper is something which has always intrigued me. When you come into a stadium, this is the highest level of pressure. When I set out to do something, I decide in my mind that failure is not an option.
What you feel very strongly about, those are the stories to tell.
I have a mind which is absolutely restless. Mind and body are entangled sensations. That brings me back to golf. It's an amazing game.
This is not a perfect game. You only learn from them.
If you have a formula to a success, then you can replicate it.
I feel this is my first step. I'm starting now.
Winner is first born in the mind. I think, therefore I am. We are all about our mind.
World premiere every Saturday on News 9 Live at 9 p.m.
जानना है तो देखिए, समझना है तो सुनिए, सीखना है तो पूछिए, और कमाना है तो खरीदिए। जानकारी, सलाह और निवेश सब एक ही सुपर ऐप पर। पैसे का सवाल है तो जवाब है मनी 9। आजादी पैसे की, अभी डाउनलोड करें।
Welcome to News 9 Live, and you are watching On Point with me. I have 9 on points on 9 top stories for you, but let me begin with the first on point. Two election masters come out with two entirely different outcomes of the Lok Sabha elections. Who will get the election right? Yogendra Yadav or Prashant Kishore? Today, we will discuss the divergent views of India's two leading election specialists. Yes, I am talking about Yogendra Yadav and Prashant Kishore. Yogendra Yadav is an academician and a psephologist. Prashant Kishore successfully crafted and created election management system. His agency and he himself is credited with many wins, including 2014 Lok Sabha election campaign for then Narendra Modi. And subsequently he diversified into number of regional elections, specifically one which he organized with Mamata Banerjee, in which Bharatiya Janata Party got defeated in Vidhan Sabha, and return of Jagan Mohan Reddy as a powerful state politician. Yogendra Yadav's analysis of the election remains impeccable. Today, both of them have come out with two different outcomes of the Lok Sabha election, which every journalist worth his salt is trying to decipher, decode. Our show is divided into different parts. Number of statements which they have made constitutes the basis of the show. So the first part is actually about the numbers these two gentlemen have spoken about. So let's talk about numbers and what Prashant Kishore says. Prashant Kishore says BJP will retain its 2019 tally of 303, which means not less, but it is going to go up. He also says BJP can do better than 2019 Lok Sabha elections. Prashant Kishore says BJP will gain 15-20 seats in the south and east of India. BJP will be close to its Maharashtra tally of 2019. It's an important statement. And then Prashant Kishore says that the minor issues of north and west will be offset by gains in east and south. He goes on to say, even in the worst case scenario, BJP will not lose 50 seats in north and west. Opposition not sweeping any BJP stronghold state. Clear thing. BJP is winning more than 300 seats, can better 2019, is in a strong position Nothing has changed in the states. So Prashant Kishore is not going to get into nitty-gritty. The interviews on which the program has been based, specifically the video interviews and not the text interviews. Now let's come to Yogendra Yadav. Yogendra Yadav says, BJP will be under 272. NDA will lose 60 to 75 seats. BJP likely to be under 250 seats. 1 out of 6 BJP voters not voting for Bharatiya Janata Party. Yogendra Yadav also says in one of his interviews that NDA can lose 16 to 20 seats in Maharashtra and UBT Shiv Sena will do very well. Uddhar Balasaheb Thackeray. He also says that the India bloc will be 30 plus in Tamil Nadu. 30 plus. It means that out of 39, it's 30 plus. He also says Bharatiya Janata Party can lose 12 seats in Karnataka. 12 seats. BJP can gain 4 seats in Odisha. Incremental gain. I think it's happening at the cost of BJD and Congress. And BJP will lose 8 to 10 seats in Rajasthan. He also says BJP is losing Rai Bareli and Amethi. Now the question is, why outcomes differ? Why outcomes differ? So before I just go on to my guests, because I'm joined by my input editor Brijesh Pandey and my other guest, let me just play out a bite of Priyanka Gandhi Vadra first.
हरियाणा में तो एकदम एक लहर है बीजेपी के खिलाफ. पूरे देश भर में ये अंडर करंट है. लोग थक गए हैं इनकी राजनीति से. ये जो सत्ता की राजनीति है, जो कुछ भी कर लेंगे सिर्फ सत्ता के लिए, लेकिन जनता को नकारने वाली राजनीति है. बेरोजगारी बहुत हो गई है, महंगाई बहुत चरम पे है और लोग थक चुके हैं और बदलाव आएगा.
I'm joined by Ajit Jha. I'm joined by Brijesh Pandey. I'm joined by Jayanto Chaudhary. And I'm joined by Mr. Anil Verma. So Brijesh first, as the show says, it's Yogendra Yadav versus Prashant Kishore. And I have written this show based on their interviews. So my question to you is, who is getting it right? The numbers part.
Well, that's an extremely difficult question to answer. But I think, the result is going to be somewhere between the two figures which both of them are predicting. I think, BJP able to improve upon its tally or get 303 as it got in 2019. Going by the kind of feedback which I am receiving, I haven't been to the field, but the feedback which I am receiving from reporters who are there on the ground and other people, I think, there is no wave per se in favor of BJP. And there is no, earlier it was kind of, from 2014 onwards, I've covered 14, 19, went to at least 7 to 8 states. It was kind of considered to be criminal to even criticize Prime Minister Narendra Modi once. But from there to a slightly diminishing return.
That's another part of the debate. Do you think that Yogendra Yadav has got the number right or Prashant Kishore?
I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle. BJP would either be close or will somewhere like around 240, 250 seats in that range.
Mr. Verma, who is getting it right? First, let's start the discussion. Who is getting the numbers right? Prashant Kishore or Yogendra Yadav?
Karthikeya, I have slight objection to the question itself, because you guys are always interested in the numbers without knowing the philosophy behind the numbers. And since I have worked with Yogen for about 2 decades, I know how serious a psephologist he is. And I am very surprised that now, after having become a politician, he is giving these kind of numbers. Earlier, he would not give these kind of numbers so long as he was an academician. But now he's a hybrid. So I must tell you 2 things before to make this question interesting and understandable to your viewers. How do you get the numbers? That's an important question. It's not important whether Prashant is right or Yogendra is right. The issue is, how do you get the numbers? Since I have worked for a very long in the domain, I can say that there are two ways of getting the numbers. One is the empirical study that you do all over the country in each and every constituency, in sampled constituency, of course. And then the data that you accumulate, the aggregate data, that the survey data that you derive, from there you draw a pointer, and that is only a pointer, that is one. And so far as the data conversion into seat is also very problematic, because we have the first past the post system. You can win by one vote and you can win by margin of 1 lakh vote. And therefore, the aggregate data share hasn't any definite correlation with the number of seats. That is one. The second thing is that how do you get the numbers is through your information, talking to people. And when you talk to the people, there is a tendency to talk to the people who are on the same wavelength as you are. And therefore, they will give you always their biased opinion about what is happening in this constituency. So either way, both the practices will not give you a credible number. And therefore, I suspect that neither Yogen nor Prashant is getting it right, probably.
Oh, you're saying again it's somewhere in the middle. Ajit, who is getting it right?
Okay, let me also confess like Anil Verma, I am a classmate of Yogendra Yadav. We did our MA together.
I think I need to speak to my guest coordination guy. I really need to speak to him now.
I have worked with him since 1995 on elections. Anil Verma was also a part of the team. Prashant, I know more because he's a fellow Bihari. We have talked on the phone several times, at least once, 1.5 hours long conversation when I called him for the Bihar State of the State Conclave for India Today. So let me tell you what is very interesting here. Neither of them has either any kind of exit poll data or any kind of pre-election survey data with them other than the ones in the public domain, which all of us know, right? Now, so obviously, they are relying on certain hunches. Yogendra Yadav is very open. He says he does what we call in psephological language, the swing ratio. He says he goes with some friends and he looks at the swing and he says he's seen some kind of 20% swing against the BJP. So he's relying on that because he's claiming he doesn't have any data. But Prashant, of course, is a communication specialist who's dealt with the data for a long time. But he does say that I don't do psephology, I don't do surveys. If you ask me personally, my own hunch is I also don't have access to any kind of special survey other than the ones in public domain at this moment. My own hunch is I would agree more with Prashant. I would agree that the BJP is, of course, is coming back in a major way, number one. Number two, the numbers will be around 300. Could be 290, could be 300. But why am I saying this? I agree with the fact that the BJP might lose some seats in the north and the west. Not maybe there is an iota of exaggeration in Yogen's analysis of how much the BJP will lose. But they will lose some, obviously. But the compensation in east and south will compensate for.
I think what you just said, K.C. Venugopal said something on the similar line. Let me play out that bite.
Everybody told that North India BJP is going to sweep or repeat the same number which they got last year. This is not going to happen at all. You can see our internal report is very clear. Rajasthan, Haryana, UP, Bihar, Maharashtra, Delhi, all these places, Congress and India Alliance will get more seats. It is a clear-cut winning situation for the India Alliance.
Okay. So Ajit says that, he would say that he would likely to agree with the numbers of Prashant. Yes, please close your argument. Yes.
Okay. One important reason is let's rely on something very basic we learned. Yogendra learned it with me in political science. And, I went abroad and worked on the subject. It's a very important insight. In India, you cannot dislodge a dominant party without a popular movement. That is the hunch I am basically relying on. BJP is a dominant party. There is no popular movement in the country like the JP movement when Indira Gandhi lost, or even a VP Singh kind of anti-corruption movement against Rajiv Gandhi's 1984 to 89 regime. So both the times when a dominant party lost, there was a popular movement on the ground. What we have today is simply an India alliance partners coming together and half of them cribbing against each other, right? I mean, we saw the man who created India alliance jumped on the other side, and we saw Mamata Banerjee attacking Rahul Gandhi, saying Congress won't even get more than 40 seats. So this alliance is not a credible alliance. It's not like the Janata Party alliance. It's not fighting on one symbol. It's just sort of trying to prop
It's time to close the first segment. It's time to pass on the baton to Jayanto. Jayanto, let us show the banner to our viewers once again. Prashant Kishore versus Yogendra Yadav. Let's put the banner out on the big screen. This is what we are discussing. Prashant Kishore versus Yogendra Yadav. Who is getting it right? All of them have given number of interviews. One after another, Prashant Kishore has given interview. Yogendra Yadav has been interviewed. Yogendra Yadav have even addressed Prashant Kishore in one of his interviews. He has put his opinion, polite interviews, but strong in their views. So, Jayanto, who is getting it right, Prashant Kishore or Yogendra Yadav?
First of all, let me say that I agree with my friend Ajit, whom I am beating up several years now. Well, he is right. There is no lahar, there is no hawa right now. There is no big movement as such, which we usually see when there is a huge change in government. That is not there. But there are undercurrents which we really can't fathom as reporters. I have only been to Bengal and to parts of UP, that's about it. But what I was struck by was by two things. One, that there is no hawa. Nobody is talking about a Modi wave. Nobody is talking about any other anti-wave. Localized factors are very, very important. If they have a crib against the party MP, whoever it is, a BJP MP or a TMC MP, that is being voiced quite a lot. So these are two factors. Whenever there is no big hawa, so in northern India, people tend to go back to the default option, which is caste. Whereas in other parts, it is, who is versus who. In Bengal, for instance, it's Mamata, it's a pro-Mamata vote or an anti-Mamata. But I'll disagree with Prashant Kishore on one thing. His assessment that he will be able to get 15 to 20 extra seats in the East. It's a little difficult. They really outdid themselves in 2019. BJP actually increased its seat tally by as much as 9-fold compared to 2014 in Bengal. They got 18 seats, which is an impossibility for them, which they themselves did not realize they would get. Mainly they got it because the left front voters voted for BJP as a kind of punishment to TMC, and also because they knew the left front had no chance of winning a seat. This time round, the left is resurgent. So whenever there is a three-way election, someone has to lose. So remember that. I don't think BJP is going to get any extra seats in Bengal at least. Bihar, from whatever I could get, and I had colleagues in Bihar who were working with me when I was handling Eastern India, and they tell me that it's split wide open. So again, BJP is going to lose perhaps some seats. They have 39 out of 40, remember that. So there is no chance for them to improve in Bihar. Yes, Odisha, there is a chance, but I don't know what will happen after Sambit Patra's statement, after Mr. Naveen Patnaik has now started really campaigning pretty hard. So let's see what happens. Assam, they had done whatever they could have done. They can't really max beyond that. The rest of the northeastern states, anyway, it doesn't really matter. They are very few in numbers. The seats are very few. So thereby I would say, we don't know when there is no lahar. It could be that BJP could actually get 300 seats. Also, when there is no lahar, you never know that people might decide they will not vote for BJP, and BJP might be reduced to 220 or so, or whatever someone else is saying.
Okay.
In the case of
fair enough. There's more to discuss, Jayanto. There's more to discuss. There's more to have a, I would say, more meat in the conversation. So now I'll take you to the second part, and the second part is about Prime Minister Modi and Tina Factor. First time I read Tina Factor was a newspaper edit, and the noted journalist who went on to become the minister in Narendra Modi's cabinet, and who also functioned as a spokesperson of Congress party, after that, wrote one article. It was, there is no alternative, Tina factor. Basically, the argument was about the Congress party, there is no alternative right now. So the Congress stays in the game. So it's Tina and Prime Minister Modi. So what Prashant Kishore says, there is no alternative to Prime Minister Modi. He says absence of clamour for an opposition leader. He also says absence of positive vote for India bloc. In one of his interviews, he says that the Rahul Gandhi's leadership has been unsuccessful. He's saying no fundamental change has taken place on ground. He does agree, disappointment with Modi, but there is no mass anger. He also agrees that the traction for Prime Minister Modi has declined. And this specific part was also addressed by Yogendra Yadav in one of his interviews. He says India bloc is not in opposition to BJP. And he also says BJP is winning because of the laziness of the opposition. He also believes that the Congress leadership should be handed over to someone else. He does agree that the Prime Minister Modi's brand is on a steady decline. Yogendra Yadav says the mood of the nation changed as the election inched closer. Shift in BJP voters from 2019 towards opposition. Prime Minister Modi, his invincible image has taken a hit. Anger against incumbent BJP leaders in constituencies. But he also agrees there is no anti-Modi wave. But then he says PM Modi's name is not enough to shut down other issues. He says Modi factor undercut by unemployment and inflation. He also says dormant issues took center stage. He says all castes in UP moving away from BJP. He says it's a waveless election. He also says Tina factor is stronger in urban areas. So one thing, Tina factor, another is Prime Minister Modi. So Mr. Verma, my question to you is Tina factor today working for Bharatiya Janata Party that there is no alternative to Modi? As Yogendra has argued.
Karthike, a political contestation which is an open and shut case is not a vibrant democracy. So the very fact that there are, question marks over the outcome, what will happen, how much seats, that shows the vibrancy of the democracy, that it's open both ways. But let us examine the three things that have come out more seriously. One thing you should not forget, that this election is Modi-centric. And whether it be the BJP or whether it be the opposition bloc, they are both centered on Modi. And they are trying to, focus only on Modi and Modi and Modi. That's why Modi has become a brand in this election. It's a Modi-centric election. The second thing that you said, Tina factor, before coming to that, let me also tell you that the kind of things, so many things you have said about Modi and quoting Prashant Kishore and Yogendra Yadav. One thing that is very important with how this Modi branding has come about. I would like to tell you two things on these issues. One is that smart politics that Prime Minister Modi has played since his day one, and that is the Man Ki Baat. For the last 10 years, almost about 110 episodes, and this must be probably a world record, that the Prime Minister talking to the entire nation every month on a fixed day. So this is probably a world record. And the age group 18 to 28 is the age group who is the most greatly influenced by a Man Ki Baat and who is now today a voter. And this is a very big block. And in this block, the number is very sizable so far as the voters are concerned. And this is certainly not going to vote against Modi. They are basically pro-Modi. So this is one thing that Modi has, through his smart politics, because he did not talk of his party, he did not talk of his government. policies. He did not talk about BJP himself, nothing. He only talked about the people and good things which people, liked and they were impressed. That is one thing. He has developed a connect with the people, and that is a branding Modi that he has done. And the second thing is that, as you said, that Yogendra has said that caste is not a factor in this election. I beg to disagree. That in this election,
no, he has said one more thing which Mr. Verma, one more thing which is fundamental, which he says more than caste, which I found pertinent was that unemployment, jobs have undercut Prime Minister Modi's appeal.
Let me come to that. What if the castes are going against BJP or away from BJP? Let me remind you that a very important development which I call constituency transformation. And during the last 10 years, when Modi came and he said inclusive politics, sabka saath, sabka vikas, people thought it was a jumla and all that. But he really took it very seriously. And whether it be the ticket allocation or position in the government and leadership structures, he has been quite fair to the subaltern, the OBC and the Dalits. And therefore, today, what he has come up with is that he has not neglected caste calculus. He has kept the caste calculus very much on his books, but at the same time he has superimposed a class structure over and tried to amalgamate the class structure with the caste dynamics, and he has created 4 clear-cut class, and that is writ large on his policies and statements. One is women, the second is the poor and subalterns in the form of Labharti, the third is the marginal farmers, and the fourth is the young people. And these are the 4 classes, and they are not very upbeat about the people who are not able to see the leher and the hawa about Modi. They are probably not able to gauge the undercurrent of these transformations. And therefore, we might be in for some surprises on the 4th of June when ballots come.
Okay, you're saying that we might be in for some surprises on the 4th. Ajit, do you agree with Yogendra Yadav or Prashant Kishore? Let me put it this way. I know it might be little tough for you to take sides, but who do you think is getting the picture right on Tina and Modi? Before I go to Ajit, Mr. Verma, Prashant Kishore or Yogendra Yadav?
No, I again try to bypass this question because as a psephologist, psephologist is the person who is doing scientific study of voting behavior.
No,
and
you can. No. I have no quarrel with it. Your explanation on the larger pictures is very nice, but you can always say, Karthikeya, bypass, and this is what I want to say. So this is the second bypass you have given.
I have already answered in the first round that I think neither Yogendra is getting it right nor.
Okay. So in the second segment, you are also saying that neither of them is getting it right. Ajit.
Yeah.
See, I tend to, although I confess to begin with that Yogendra is my classmate and very close friend even today. He sends me messages, we talk to each other. But I tend to agree more with Prashant Kishore. And the reason is the question on Modi that you asked, I actually differ with Yogendra. I think Modi's extraordinary cultural connect with the masses has not changed a great deal. Let's take a more recent event. Let's take December 2023, when the Hindi heartland states went to polls, right? Yogendra himself predicted, and so did a lot of other left liberals at that time, that the BJP is going to certainly lose Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and possibly Chhattisgarh. Now look at what happened. The BJP won Madhya Pradesh with 9% extra vote. I mean, the swing in favor of BJP in Madhya Pradesh was a solid 9% positive. How could they get it wrong? So obviously, I have Rajasthan again, they won, Chhattisgarh, they won. So my conclusion is between December 2019 and today as we are speaking, nothing much has changed in North India, right? Except the fact that we are having an election. And the only thing changed, which you saw me pointing out, first phase, second phase, the turnouts were low, but by the third phase, the turnouts almost came back to 2019. So I don't think there has been a fundamental shift there in North India. So I feel that when Yogendra is saying, I heard Yogendra in one of his interviews, where he says BJP will not even get 50 seats in Uttar Pradesh. I just don't agree. BJP's extraordinary performance in the last 2 assembly elections, in the last 2 Lok Sabha elections, in UP is enough to prove, and the fact that he's contesting himself from Varanasi, he has one of the most popular chief ministers, Yogi Adityanath, ruling UP. So I don't believe there is a big change going on. There is no anti-Modi leher in North India. So I feel that Yogendra is exaggerating the amount of loss based on a swing ratio. That also swing ratio collected not seriously, but just walking around, in North India. And secondly, you mentioned Maharashtra. See, Maharashtra,
Karnataka, even in his numbers, Karnataka 12 seats. As a journalist, a lot of people have said that BJP is losing a lot of seats in Karnataka.
Okay, so let me answer for Maharashtra. Maharashtra, there is no one has actually found out how much sympathy wave is there for either Sharad Pawar or Thackeray. But the fact that last time BJP contested only 23 seats in Maharashtra, 121. This time it is contesting 35 seats. Those 35 seats, I think the BJP's performance will be very good. What might happen? Mr. Shinde might lose some of the seats that he has got. So even if the NDA's numbers come down, I don't think the BJP's numbers will come down. Same thing I feel in many of the states that the allies in Bihar, for example, I think Jayanto pointed out that everyone is saying it's an open question. Yes, but remember, Bihar, BJP is only contesting 17 seats. I think it will win probably 16 of those 17. The trouble is with JDU. The trouble might be with Chirag Paswan, the allies. So my feeling is that the BJP's performance will be close to 290, 300. That Prashant Kishore probably says more.